I had to work on my own love for myself before I could find love in another. And then that love in another would then inspire me to create massive change for myself, my community, and then hopefully the world. I often think about the comparison between the astronaut and the psychonaut, where the astronaut is exploring the edges of our atmosphere and our universe, and the psychonaut is exploring the edges of our mind and our psyche and our consciousness. Both of those are very important things. However, I like to think that the psychonaut is more valuable to the human race and the planet.
Welcome to the Psychedelic Diaries. I'm Ray Christian, and we've got a banger of a show for you today. We'll be discussing remote microdosing, deep solo work, and of course, high doses on psychedelics. Cory Firth, founder of Dose Day, will be here for a deep dive and a soul search. But first, as usual, let's start things off with a nugget and a noodle. And today's news nugget: Colorado is acting as if. There's a bill moving through the legislative branch that says if the feds move MDMA to any schedule but Schedule 1, it will be immediately legalized and accessible for residents. And as for the noodle, something I've been noodling on of late, a message to DEA, FDA, and Health Canada. What's worse, when the wrong person is imprisoned or when a guilty party goes free? Any trial attorney worth his salt will tell you false imprisonment is the greater injustice, and yet magic mushrooms remain imprisoned in a wall of laws based on lies. John Ehrlichman, Richard Nixon's top aide in the war on drugs, is on record saying, "Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." You want to know what this was really all about? Ehrlichman goes on to say, two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. Okay. That's appalling. Look, imprisonment in the US judicial system requires guilt beyond all reasonable doubt. And now that we know we were lied to about drugs, we shouldn't have to prove that magic mushrooms are good for us. You should have to prove they're bad for us. They should be immediately removed from Schedule 1 until you can show beyond all reasonable doubt that they're harmful. And this study showing alcohol as the most harmful substance while psilocybin is the least harmful might make that difficult. We are in the midst of a mental health crisis. Legalize psilocybin now. Something to noodle on. Our next guest is the founder of Dose Day, former executive director of the Canadian Psychedelic Association, and an expert storyteller. Cory Firth, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ray, thanks for having me, man.
Cory, really quickly, you play the Indian flute. How often are you playing these days?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say I'm any kind of expert on it. I'm just playing around. My daughter, it helps her calm down, and it's good for going to bed. And if I'm out of stories, then I pick the flute up and try to go, a couple nights a week.
All right, Cory, let's dive in. I love Dose Day, the concept, the boldness. What is it, and why did you decide to start it?
Yeah, I guess so. Dose Day is a peer support group connecting like-minded microdosers to protocols and practices to enhance your microdosing practice. Um, and the reason I started it, I guess, initially was I had just been getting so many messages about microdosing, especially as the research just continues to come out around psychedelics in general. Microdosing seems to be the most accessible thing for most people, and I still get probably 10 messages a day. Hey, what's this microdosing thing? So easier for me to get groups together than to message people one on one. So yeah, the microdosing Dose Day community was born out of that, and it's still a growing progress or growing process of developing what it really is. But in its essence, it's connecting like-minded microdosers to help them enhance their practice of microdosing. And I keep calling it a practice because that's how I view it. And I view it in that way because I'm a little concerned that psychedelics will become just another pill we pop, and I don't want that to happen. And I like to think of the way that we can avoid that is if we start to coach up microdosing as a practice. And the simple way that I've been describing it is in a Venn diagram between concentrative exercises and meditative exercises. Pulling from those two, right in the middle, we have contemplative exercises. And for me, microdosing is the ultimate contemplation, where you have a focus. So when you're pulling from the contemplative side, you can think of exercises like yoga, where you're focused on like intentional movements that allow you to sort of surrender and move deeper into the body and connect to the mind. And so we pull concentration out of that, and we set really good intentions, and we bring a focus of something we're looking to adjust in our life. And to me, an intention is really just a shift in state of mind or state of being. And so we call that in on the concentrated side. And then over on the meditative side, obviously we've got meditation and breath work and different sort of um, practices that help you get into presence. And so when you bring those two things in, you've got this really good contemplative exercise that allows you to sort of allow things to come up as they are, and just sort of engage with them in a new way. And I think psychedelics really help you to do that. And then at that microscopic sort of subperceptual dose of a microdose allows you to sort of see things in a new way, see patterns in a new way, see your mindset in a new way, see patterns in a new way. And so, yeah, it's been really fun connecting that so far and sharing my protocols. There are many really great protocols out there, including Fadiman, who I know you've had on. I think you maybe have talked with Paul Stamets. They have great, great protocols. But to me, what they're really focused in on is the medicine and the dose. And about 95%, in my opinion, 95% of a practice or a protocol should include some additional elements of connectivity, which, maybe spiritual, maybe meditative, maybe mindset based. And so, yeah, it's pulling from a few different areas and creating new protocols that we can sort of build together too. I go along with everybody along for the ride and learn as we go. And it's been a really fun journey so far.
I like this description of the how and the scope of microdosing and how this is different from just another pill. It's perhaps unlike any pharmaceutical we've ever seen, where it's almost like a pharmaceutical plus a medical device, where like how you do it actually is important. So switching gears a little bit to the why. You are, as you said, it's like you're the founder of Dose Day, but you also practice with it as an avid microdoser. What are two pleasant outcomes from microdosing that you've seen?
Well, I'll stick with just Dose Day for the first part, and then I'll talk about my own anecdotal experience. But with Dose Day, the interesting thing that's come out from the first few groups that we've run is the connection to other people that are going through similar things is wildly impactful.
Hmm.
So think of it almost like a mastermind group, like in a business mastermind. You've got people that are dealing with similar things, whether it's early stage startup or even a creative mastermind where you're working on a piece of art. It's nice to be able to sort of share the challenges with one another and then kind of hash it out in a new way. It gives you a new perspective on things, right? So what I've gotten back from those that have participated so far is that connection with other people really adds another layer of connection and transformation because they get to see things in a new way by sharing with others and then having that accountability from the rest of the group to sort of uh, keep you in line with the support that you need to see your intention through and kind of actualize it in a way. And I can dive into more of that if it makes sense. But for me, the anecdotal evidence that I've seen, and I just say anecdotal because a lot of people still question if microdosing is effective, right? People keep asking, like, where's the research? How come we haven't had a double-blind placebo study that shows all this? And yeah, that would be great. I think it'd be awesome. And your intro was like, you have to prove to us that they don't work, right? The governments and the health representatives at this point. And I'm kind of with you on that. I mean, we never we never asked the lab coach to tell us if coffee was effective at increasing our energy, but we microdose with it every single day. And it's the same
Mm.
thing, I think the same thing applies for microdosing and psychedelics in general. And so anecdotally for me, um, I see a lot of mind body connection, just the ability to sort of connect into the mind when I need to, in a state of maybe anxiety or depression or overwhelm pops into my life. And if I'm on a microdose, I find I can connect into my body, and that helps me kind of somatically find the way through and release whatever I need to. So I guess in short, that's kind of presence focus. And just sort of higher connection to consciousness or something, you know?
Yeah, I like this idea of connecting to the body and really starting to illuminate the mind body connection. That concept is something we seem to all agree on, but actually proving it is a tough call or a tough challenge. And it seems like with psychedelics, what it can do for mental health, we might be able to start mapping that to biomarkers and start to see, no, that actually people that do this and see the mental health benefits also happen to see tremendous physical benefits. So I appreciate what you're doing. So, Cory, two things feel very potent to me, especially the way that they combine. Number one, the way that we can now digitally connect, like with Dose Day. And number two, the fact that you can grow your own mushrooms. And it's not that hard to do. Are we getting to a point where we are dramatically lessening the impact of FDA, DEA, Health Canada rules?
I think so. I mean, like for us in Canada, we have legalized cannabis, right? So it's following that path in a way. The way I see it is we've seen that path. I apologize if you can hear my baby in the background. That's the authentic flow of these things. But she's just heading down for a nap. Um,
No
but
worries.
just to follow the same lineage of where cannabis came, um, we're kind of at that point where legalization is it's inevitable. I think. Um, what happened with cannabis when we got it legalized in 2018 is public opinion changed. So once public opinion changes, the government changes, and that's kind of the natural way that it progresses. In the U.S., it's different because you've got the federal, but then you've also got the state level, and they all kind of act independently, and it's just a bit of a different um, higher level challenge, I would guess. And from the folks that I connect with down in the states, they see that all the time. And we're lucky in Canada where we don't have as much of that. We do have the provincial and the federal, but they all kind of the federal kind of works to. I like to say support the provincial in a good way, but in this instance, what I've seen is that there's kind of there's a lot of growing acceptance here in Canada, and it's very similar to the cannabis side of things. I mean, when cannabis became legal in 2018, they were still asking for the research, and actually they still haven't done the research that they were asking for before it became legal. So I think we're going to run to that same point. I mean, we're going to have a court challenge that comes through in Canada here soon, and that's going to push them even further. They're not going to want to do that. It will likely prolong things a little bit, in my opinion, but it's a necessary evil, I guess, at this point to go down that path. But I mean, it's not stopping anybody. We've got uh, gray area shops popping up selling psilocybin now in different forms. The I would call the underground is coming above ground, which is amazing. And the therapists and the facilitators are really showing up in a new way, in a more positive light and more accepted. And the best example that I can give from my experience is the last psychedelic society meeting that I had here in my hometown in Kingston. And I like to say that Kingston's the psychedelic capital of Canada because of 140,000 people population, we have like 500 psychedelic society members. And I would say that I would guess, and I don't have this down, and so people can poo-poo this in the comments maybe, but I would say that's the largest per capita in Canada. But the last psychedelic society meeting we had, we met in the basement of a bar here in Kingston, 10 or 12 of us, all like sort of secretive and private and shy about why we're there, and not really open to telling people we were going to something like this. I'm not like that. I was not like that then, but there was a lot of just secrecy there, right? Fast forward 2 years, and a month from now, I'm going to be on stage in front of 500 people at one of Canada's premier universities, talking psychedelics, talking psychedelic stories, talking psychedelic expansion and access. So it's crazy how fast it's happening. And I guess another little nugget there, another little story is my time with the Psychedelic Association. We were meeting with the Health Canada representatives quite a bit, trying to just help educate them a little bit, right? It's not our approach, and my approach is always to call in versus call out. And I felt like that was a really good tactic that we took to help educate them. And the first meeting we had, I mean, they couldn't pronounce ibogaine or psilocybin or ayahuasca. The next meeting we had 30 days later, they were much more educated. They were pronouncing the words correctly, which was a great start. But they actually had some of the research. They knew what they knew what this was all about. So they're educating themselves fast. I mean, we have a pandemic still, I guess that's still unfolding, and that's still a bit of a priority here. But I see it changing. I see it changing fast, and I hope we can avoid the court challenges that are coming down and avoid some of the unnecessary hurdles that are here now. Because, like you said, these things grow in our backyard, and it's not stopping anyone from participating at this point.
I love this idea, this concept of with marijuana, they were asking for the research and they're still asking for it, and yet it was legalized, maybe even sooner than we thought. And it feels like that's the same thing here with psilocybin and a lot of these psychedelics, where this idea of prohibition is kind of like legislating morality. And quite frankly, that ain't it. And so when you look at what we're doing here, there's some people that say, well, we'll see it. We'll see it 2 years ahead of time. It's going to be a long process. Maybe not. It seems like with marijuana, it got kind of fast tracked. And perhaps that happens with psilocybin or psychedelics in general, especially when you have public opinion that could sway quickly. In addition, you've got the ability of the judicial branch to come in and say, no, we're going to quickly strike down this unconstitutional law or restriction. And that could circumvent the entire legislative process. So we've got some ways there's more than one way to skin the cat on this one. And it seems like this could speed up quite quickly.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, just to add to the public opinion side of things, it's because it's a real focus for me right now. Is it's time for us to step out and share our stories. Because for me, if we transform out loud, we prevent others from suffering alone. And the only way that we can really shift that narrative is we share our stories and show what's possible for those that are seeking a psychedelic experience. Maybe they've had a recreational experience when they were younger, or they were conditioned on the war on drugs, but now they hear a research paper from, the Nature publication, or they read an article in a mainstream news outlet, and they're wondering about, how can this thing help me transform? And in order for us to change somebody's mind, we have to show them how we changed ours.
Mm.
And if we share our stories more, I think that's one way to shift the narrative and one way to weave together a new tale for us all here when we talk about expanding our consciousness and our healing and our transformation. And I think that's a big way. And we can talk about that a little bit, but just a little plug for the Nikean Foundation that I'm working at. We're about to launch a really cool project around storytelling, and I think it's going to help us really, in Canada, but also across the world, as we still stay connected with our international partners, to help people tell their stories, because everyone's coming out of the psychedelic closet now, and it's important for, like I said, those psychedelic seekers to see what's possible for them by hearing someone's intimate story of how they overcame, whatever they overcame, or a level of personal growth that they were able to achieve.
Exactly. This concept of storytelling coming out of the psychedelic closet, it's not easy. And yet we're pretty active on TikTok. And there's this one account, this guy I really like, and he posted this meme where it's like, when you get 100,000 views, 10,000 likes, and then some no-name account that looks like a bot criticizes your post, and it shows him with this butthurt look. And I can relate to that, where you get all this love and then a couple comments to the negative where they're criticizing you for coming out, or they're saying, how can you support drugs? There's kids that see this. And I felt that. And yet it's someone's got to do this, because we were lied to for a long time. So someone's got to come out and tell these stories. Someone's got to be the one saying, no, we were lied to, and this has actually been transformative. Not only is it not bad, it's not indifferent, it's profound. It's beautiful. It's powerful. It's perhaps the most impactful thing of my life. And those stories can really start to sway when people see a face to it, and not some anonymous poster or someone that's cloaked in the veil of anonymity.
Yeah, 100%. I love to play up on that if you're okay with it. The
Go with it.
propaganda of the war on drugs was a very powerful story, perpetuated by the Nixon government initially, and then spread across the world. Really, especially here in Canada. We were a little later to it, a few years later before we scheduled the way you guys did. But the story of how they convinced the public to believe that that African Americans were somehow bulletproof because they used crack cocaine is an insane example of how powerful storytelling is. So if you've ever looked at what Carl Hart talks about in his book, this is a story from his book. I'm just reading it right now. That's why I bring it up. They convinced the American public that they made it a racial thing, right? Which is what you were introducing in the beginning of the podcast. And the story is they
It's like
convinced
they were super powerful if they're on crack or something, like PCP.
they convinced the American public that African Americans that were on crack cocaine were invincible to 32 caliber bullets. So they had to
Oh
increase
God.
the police bullets to 38 caliber just in case, right? So they really created the war on drugs through propaganda, and now it's transformed into PR, and we call it PR these days, and we just need to be careful of it, and we need to be able to um, show an alternative, like you said, and just create another pathway for people to read a different story, whether they agree with it or not. You're going to have the critics, you're going to have the thinkers, and you're going to have the doers. And the lineup for the critics and the lineup for the thinkers are long, and the doers, they're not even in the line because they're busy. We've got to get busy telling our stories. We've got to get busy showing people what's possible.
It's like this concept of the storytelling. Yeah, we need some data, and we can do studies and surveys till the cows come home. But when you have a story on the other direction, such as I started using magic mushrooms and all of a sudden my career took off, or I beat out three guys for the promotion that I wanted to get, or all of a sudden I got a job offer for something that I'd never believed I could get. Those types of stories could be powerful. And I think with speaking of which, you and I think you're one of the guys that has talked about and enjoyed the beauty and impact of solo high doses on psilocybin or psychedelics. Cory, I'm curious for you, why do you like the solo work?
Well, the solo work is, in my opinion, and this is not it's not advocating anything. This is just anecdotally and from my own perspective. Uh, to me, it's the most important work.
Hmm.
Um, like we think about I often think about the comparison between the astronaut and the psychonaut, where the astronaut is exploring the edges of our atmosphere and our universe, and the psychonaut is exploring the edges of our mind and our psyche and our consciousness. Both of those are very important things. However, I like to think that the psychonaut is more valuable to the human race and the planet. And so I think that the most impactful way to sharpen the sword of the psychonaut is to go into your own individual experiences by yourself in an intentional, respectful, safe, and effective way,
Yes.
um, to gather the insights you need to make your ordinary life more exciting and more impactful, so that you can serve the greater good in whatever capacity that may be. For me, it's making these things accessible and empowering people to see what's possible. Um, for someone else in the medical field, they need to do their own work too. We often talk about therapists needing to do their own work, and there's many ways to do that. And I prefer the solo work because it allows me to see how sharp that sword is. And if I can handle myself in those experiences, no matter how difficult, and I can teach myself how to regulate with having safety boundaries, like I always have a therapist that knows when I'm going to be going into solo work, so that I can call him and he can walk me through any regulation that I need to, or I have my partner close by, so she's always available to support me too. Um, and I always make sure that I'm not going too far, because I have a lot to think about and a lot of responsibility. So I'm doing this in a safe way, but it's really exploring the edges of consciousness and the edges of the mind. To, like I said, someone said this to me once. The psychedelic experience is gathering insight to make your ordinary life more exciting. And I just keep thinking about that. And the solo work really allows for that the most, in my opinion.
That sword, that samurai sword analogy really slaps, and I relate to this concept of how you say that work ends up making you better in normal life or when you're in an ordinary state of consciousness. It reminds me sometimes the solo work where there's nobody there to hold your hand. There's nobody there. You have to do this on your own. It reminds me of oxygen mask training for professional athletes, where you train with reduced oxygen in practice. So then when you go onto the court or the field, you can handle it because you've been doing the work when it was harder. And that's kind of what solo work feels like to me. And Cory, I'm curious if we can take a stab at the ineffable for this final question of the deep dive. I'll share one, I'll kick it to you. This is some solo work I did. And Cory, I had an experience where I felt like I time traveled to a younger me, and it was almost like this through this wormhole. And I remember that the experience felt very costly through in some energetic way, perhaps. But when I was there, I was able to like send or transfer this love to him. And it felt like emotions were kind of some sort of key for as a signature for time travel in a way, which, sounds hard, probably sounds crazy to explain, but that experience has really stuck with me. And I'm convinced that I did kind of converse or send some love to younger me. And I'm curious for you, Cory, what is one mystical experience that still resonates?
Oh man, they all weave together. When you talk about a story, like I feel like as you begin to explore the powerful benefits of psychedelics, the story just begins. And then every experience is just a new chapter and a new part of the narrative. And I go back to the first thing that comes to mind is my first ayahuasca experience, which wasn't solo, it was a group experience at a retreat. Um, but really, like the title of that story, if I was to give it a title, was ayahuasca showed me that true love can really change the world.
Hmm.
And at that point, I was with a partner at the time, a woman that we were having our ups and downs, and we weren't sure if we were going to last. And it turns out we didn't. And I was sort of able to see that in my experience and why that wasn't going to work. But then I was also shown a new level of love that was going to appear, and it started within me. And I had to work on my own love for myself before I could find love in another. And then that love in another would then inspire me to create massive change for myself, my community, and then hopefully the world. And hopefully I do have that level of impact in the world, but it doesn't really matter because I've had that level of impact on myself and my community. And now here I am. But yeah, what it really showed me was that I needed to step away and go in, do a little psychological pilgrimage of the self and figure out, what was disconnected and what was lost and what needed to be regained, what needed to be optimized and fixed and, destroyed. I have the analogy of the iPhone is a great analogy of the whole human experience or the whole human condition, in my opinion, where you have the hardware, which is the body, in relation to the phone, and then you have the operating system, which is your mind, and you have ways to go in and sort of update the operating system a little bit from time to time, and psychedelics really allow you to do that. And so what I had to do was just keep going in, and over time, I was able to connect to my intuition a little bit more, connect to my true self, my heart,
Hmm.
and it guided me. And this story is really profound, and we don't probably have enough time for it, but it connected me to my partner Caitlin, who I'm with now, in a massive way, allowing us to cosmically connect like I can't explain, and create a level of love that never existed for me before, and I didn't think was possible. And for me, is just my constant inspiration to create cool things in the world and connect with amazing people like you, Ray, and the rest of the psychedelic community
Thank you.
to hopefully bring transformation like this to more people that are looking for it. And all of my mystical experiences are continuing to weave together a really cool narrative, a really cool story, and they don't end. And they probably intersect with your little kid self, because I've been there and I've had a couple experiences like that too. And
Yeah,
that idea of collective consciousness is really powerful, especially as we start to tell these stories. So thanks for asking that one. That's great.
of course. Yeah, it feels like compounding interest sometimes with these journeys or constant peeling of the onion. Okay, that was a wonderful deep dive, Cory. Thank you for that. We got to transition now to the speed round soul search. Okay. Question number one, Cory. What is one company you like in psychedelics that you are not associated
The daily mushroom.
with? Okay. Cory, you are God and you have our universe inside of you, kind of like that cat had on the collar at the end of Men in Black. Would you change anything?
No. Am I supposed to elaborate on that?
Hey, you know what? Sometimes brevity is the soul of wit. Okay, question number
We
three.
need chaos and order. Sorry, we need chaos and order, and there's a lot of chaos happening right now, which we do need some order. So, you know, that would be the initial sort of thought, but we need the chaos. So I'm excited. I wouldn't change a thing.
Ah, I fucking love that. Great answer. Okay, question number three. Cory, what is your ideal Saturday night mix of mind altering substances to fully unwind?
Uh, Cannabis is one of my best friends. So just a nice blend of a high THC sativa, high THC indica, and a high THC hybrid with some breath work is just a real powerful connector. It's a beautiful way to go a little deeper, find some creativity, and connect to some things that need some change or some optimization.
Even when he's unwinding, he's still optimizing. Okay, question number four. Cory, what piece of news from the last 10 years about you specifically would tickle 2012 Cory Firth the most?
What piece of news? Oh, geez. I'd probably go back to the love thing and having a baby. Because at that point in 2012, I wanted to have a baby. I knew I wanted to be a dad. Being a dad has always been the number one job that I've always thought is the most important thing a man can do. And I never thought it was going to be possible for me just because of all the mental illness that I had suffered from.
Hmm,
And so knowing that Cory Firth's the dad, I know 2012 Cory would be pretty stoked.
very good. Cory, that was a delightful interview. You were excellent. Thank you so much. Where can the viewers find you?
Nikean.org is the big project that I'm working on right now. You can check out what we're up to over the next couple of weeks. We'll see some new messaging that's coming out from there. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram at Cory Firth for both of those. Um, yeah, that's those are probably the best spots.
Fantastic. Okay, next week, Tyler Bryden from Speak AI will be joining the show. Please subscribe to this show and join me at the psilocybin soiree, the boot camp for solo high dose explorers. And thank you for watching this episode of Psychedelic Diaries. I'm Ray Christian. See you next time.